Hello, hello, hello. Anybody there?
I'm here.
Well, you're the most important person to be here. I really probably should be wearing headphones. Let me see. Once I see a few people coming on, I always worry that I do it to the wrong page. So
Uh-oh.
sometimes it just takes a minute. I'm seeing, they're saying 11 reactions, but if somebody's there, could Healthy Living Live. I'm Chef AJ, and today I'm interviewing my good friend and one of the smartest people I know when it comes to getting kids to eat healthy, probably the smartest. Her name is Sharon McRae, and she is not only a health coach based in Columbia, Maryland, but a PCRM cooking instructor. And I had to call out the big guns today because I'm getting tired of trying to help people in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program when the problem really is a family problem. And so thank you so much for your time, Sharon. Thank you for being here, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to everyone about this very important topic.
Absolutely. So if you guys want to know why Sharon is so passionate about healthy eating, there's so many wonderful interviews already that are on my Facebook page under videos, Dr. Mondo, his Facebook page on YouTube. Just in a nutshell, she had a very strong family history of cancer. Both of her parents, her mother died quite early from breast cancer, her aunts and uncles and grandparents. And so what's really interesting about Sharon is that, yes, she is a member of the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, but not because she is overweight or has ever been overweight, and not because she's ever suffered from food addiction. It just so happens that we eat the exact same diet. But she's doing it for health reasons, and I'm doing it for health reasons too, but initially I adopted this diet to facilitate weight loss and overcome food addiction, but it's the exact same diet. And what's interesting is she actually feeds her family this diet. She has 3 teenage children, 2 twin girls who are 20 or 19 now?
19, just turned 19.
And a son who's 14, right?
15.
Well, close. Okay. But you transitioned them almost 10 years ago to this way of eating, right?
It was about 9 years ago when they were 10 and 6, yes.
Absolutely. And I've seen these kids. I've stayed with them. They visited me in California, and they eat the way we eat. I mean, maybe they eat a little bit more rich food like the nut butters and the avocado and the tahini and the corn tortillas and maybe even some salt-free Ezekiel bread, but they really do eat this way. So when you say kids won't eat healthy food, well, that's because you're giving them another option. Would you agree to that, Sharon?
Absolutely. No question about it. If there's other options in the house, their brains are just like our brains, and that's what they'll go for.
Right. And so the saying that we use in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth, that applies just as well to children.
Absolutely. In fact, in some ways more so because all the other kids are eating it. There's peer pressure, that sort of thing.
Socially acceptable, right? Exactly. Because one of the questions I got in advance was, well, I don't want my kids to be social outcasts at birthday parties or be made fun of at school. So that's a real concern for a lot of parents. I think it's an excuse at the end of the day. But how do you address that? Because I know you work with a lot of clients. You work with the family as a system. You work on the whole family. You don't just work with the kid.
Yeah, well, the principle that I used when it came to going along with the crowd is the one that actually applies now that I have teenagers, which is, do I want my kids to go to a party someday where all the other kids are smoking and drinking? And do I want them to start smoking and drinking just to fit in with the crowd? Or do I want them to make a better decision because they know it's not in their best interest health-wise? Now, I totally understand as a parent that you don't want your kid to feel like a social outcast. I do. But my point is, you can send your child to school or to a party or to any other event with a healthy treat. And these days, so many kids have food sensitivities and food allergies. It's very easy to say, my son's lactose intolerant, or we don't eat that way. Is it okay if I bring something for him to share, like a cupcake that is, made from oats and dates and those sorts of things, instead of the birthday cake with dairy and eggs and milk and all those things that we know are not health promoting? You don't have to make your kid feel like an outcast if it's all in the way that you present it to your kids. And
right.
If there's one piece of advice I always give families that I work with, and it's usually the moms, but I have also worked with dads on occasion, it is, when you know better, you do better. Mm-hmm. And the first step in this whole journey, and that is for adults as well as parents and kids as well, is to learn why. To learn why it's important to eat this way. Dr. Joel Fuhrman has written 2 excellent books. Disease Proof Your Child was my Bible for a long time. And then his latest book, Fast Food Genocide. I mean, if that doesn't drill home the message that what you feed your child impacts so much. It impacts the way that they interact with other people. It affects their ability to concentrate. They're linking it to autism and ADD and all sorts of other afflictions that kids are suffering, not to mention obesity, which in itself is terrible for a child to have to deal with. So once you learn this information and you share it, depending on the age of your kids, of course, it has to be age appropriate. But when you share it with your kids, and to be honest, when my mother died, which was about 9 years ago now, we were all very, very close with her. And so what I did with my kids who were then 10 and 6 was to say, we just lost grandma and we lost her to a disease called cancer. And we have a lot of that in our family, not just my side, but also my husband's side. And I said to them, I don't ever want you to have this disease in your whole life. And I'm going to do everything I can as your parent to protect you. And so that means we're going to be changing the way that we eat. And for them, they were raised as vegetarian, but not healthy vegetarian. There was a lot of vegetarian junk food and a lot of dairy because their pediatrician was vegetarian and told us they needed the calcium and protein. And as long as they were getting that, they were fine. So typical dinner for us when they were younger was Amy's cheese pizza and frozen peas. That was our go-to meal. And they would eat a lot of the Newman O's and, those Amy's cookies and cakes and those sorts of things. So I basically, when my mom died and I read the China study and I saw Forks Over Knives and I read Disease Proof Your Child, I knew I had to do better. And I explained it to them in those terms and they cried. They did. They cried a lot. I mean, they were devastated. It was like I took away their favorite toy and their best friend all in one moment. And they were scared because they said to me, I don't know what I'll eat now. Well, that's when I had the good fortune of meeting you at Vegetarian Summerfest and buying your book and bringing it home. And that book, Unprocessed, was literally a lifesaver. I started making the recipes in that book. And I'll be honest, I started with the treats. I started with the truffles, because I wanted my kids to see that they would not be deprived, that they could eat food that tasted good, that wasn't unhealthy, that was actually healthy for them. And once they got a taste of that, they were open to the savory food. And I remember they loved the easy cheesy peasies. And the first time I made the disappearing lasagna, they all went nuts. They couldn't get enough of it. And the mushroom stroganoff. I mean, there were so many other excellent, we still use some of the recipes in there all the time. But that was my first entry point into, I didn't like to cook, quite frankly, at the time. And it was exciting to me to be getting this feedback from my kids when I was feeding them food that I knew to be healthy for them. So the more they ate, the more they wanted and the more excited they got and the more I got them involved in the process. And we would have things like pizza night where they could decorate their own pizza and nacho night and, those sorts of things. So they got involved in the process and that made it an easier transition too. So the point here is, you don't have to make your child feel like an outcast, and you should applaud your child for making decisions that are in his or her best interest. If I could just share one story that is most indicative of how this benefited our family. When Evan, my son, was about, 8 or so, his class was having a party to celebrate some achievements in the classroom, and his teacher decided to throw them an ice cream party. And so she was bringing in all the toppings, of course, the regular Breyer's ice cream and all the crazy toppings with the candy and the jimmies and whipped cream and things like that. And I just contacted her and I said, honestly, Evan is lactose intolerant, but we also follow a vegan diet. And is it okay if I bring him his own ice cream? And she said, sure, no problem. So I made him banana berry ice cream. I might have put cocoa powder and dates in it. I don't remember. It's been a while, but I brought it in and I served it to him while his friends were getting ready to eat their ice cream. And he sat there and it was maybe a little sad because some of the other kids came around and said, what's that? And I said, oh, it's ice cream and it's made out of all fruit. And they said, oh, that sounds good. And I couldn't offer it to them. There's a strict school policy, so I couldn't offer it to them. But anyway, Evan sat and ate his ice cream, and then his friends were eating their ice cream, making their giant sundaes. I think I made him some cookies on the side, some oat cookies. And we both sat there and he noticed how wild the kids got over time, how much more rambunctious they got because the sugar was hitting their brains. And later that afternoon when we got home, I said to him, Evan, I just want to ask you a question. How did you feel eating something that was different than all of your friends? How did it make you feel? Because I wanted to know, either way, I wanted to address it. And he said to me, I felt proud. And I said, tell me about that. And he said, I was really proud that I was eating something healthy, but I was also really sad And I said, why were you sad? And he said, because I was sad that my friends were eating food that was bad for them. And in that one moment, I knew I was doing the right thing. And of course, today, now that my kids are 15 and 19, I know I did the right thing. They tell me all the time I did the right thing. And so I have no regrets. Some people might think that I'm militant and my kids might rebel. They've never, ever rebelled. They've never, because I always made the food taste good. You know, it wasn't like I wasn't feeding them bland, you know, vegetables. Everything had flavor. Everything had sauces. And like you said, they can tolerate some of the high fat, healthy foods like avocados and nuts and seeds. And they can have cocoa powder, although they all prefer carob. So that's what we do here. But they can have dates and things like that. We don't have it all the time. And the girls just celebrated their birthday and I made them sweet potato brownies with oats and dates. And I'll be honest, they were really good. And I'm not even a food addict, but I couldn't control myself. So we don't have that stuff all the time, but we do for special occasions. So they never feel deprived.
That is fantastic. And so many people are writing, Sharon, that it was so brilliant of you to start with the treats. And if you guys like what you're watching, please share it right now, especially with people you know that have children or that are struggling to get them to eat healthy. There's a share button right now. You can be sharing this in real time and asking questions. How many of you here watching today struggle with feeding your kids healthy? I'd like to take a little bit of a poll while I get ready to ask Sharon the next question. So I agree with you, Sharon, that once you know better, the onus is on you to do better. And it's never been easier to know better. You mentioned two wonderful books by Dr. Furman, Disease Proof Your Child, which I read many years ago, and it floored me to learn that he said that most adult cancers are caused by what we ate the first 10 years of life, which means that a lot of us are already screwed. We don't want that fate for our children. But now, even with fast food genocide, there's no question that these foods are deleterious to the health of all humans, particularly children with their developing brains. He talked about how it can even lead to violence and brain damage. And he used those strong words. I have a wonderful interview I did with him, and I'm sure you could get the book. It's a wonderful book. So I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question or if it's more of a Doug Lyle question. But what I have trouble understanding is once the parent knows better and they still don't do better, because it's too hard. They say, oh, you know, their kids rebel. I mean, I have one person I'm working with now where we didn't even tell the kid that they couldn't have the food. I was working with the family to help the mother. And I explained to the spouse and the child that the best thing would be for everybody to eat the healthy food. But I understand that's not possible. So then we need to support mom, because when these treats are in the house, she can't stop eating them. It's sort of like an alcoholic. If your mom was an alcoholic, she couldn't have alcohol in the house, and she is an addict to these types of foods that you guys love. So if you guys want to eat them, that's fine, but you need to eat them outside the house. And that lasted, I don't know, 1 or 2 days. They said they would support her for 21 days. We were just going to run an experiment. And then the kid just started crying. Now, this kid doesn't happen to be overweight, but clearly she is a food addict. And, you know, why do I have to eat it outside? It's cold. Why do I have to eat it in the car? And I said, well, then the next only other suggestion I can think of is then you get a locked food safe and a cabinet and refrigerator in the basement or the garage and keep those treats. But I don't understand why. I understand that it's hard to be a parent, which is why I had you, because it's easy for me to say I don't have kids. But for me growing up, it was take it or leave it. Those were the two choices. And so I don't understand if the parent truly knows that these diseases, these foods are deleterious to health, so much so that they won't eat them. Why on earth would they give them to their children?
I have a couple of explanations, and I don't know what applies to whom, but I will tell you some of the things I've heard from my clients when I've asked these probing questions. Mm-hmm. So one of the explanations is that the parent personally doesn't want to let go of these things, that it's a crutch for the parent to have them in the house because they were a source of comfort for them when they were growing up. And the second one is they don't want to, quote, deprive their child of these pleasant childhood experiences that they had. You know, they may associate cookies with parties or happy occasions and holidays, and of course candy with Halloween, and they don't want to deprive their child of that. And you know, I try to approach everyone from where they're coming from. I understand that need as a parent to make your children happy. There's no greater gift than seeing your child smile and laugh and enjoy something that you've given him or her when he does something good. But my point here is that if you know that the certain foods are bad for their health, processed foods in particular, dairy, I mean, these foods are horrible for their health. You don't necessarily have to feel like you're depriving them if you take those things away. You can give them healthy treats, but they don't have to be the things that are harmful to their health. There are so many options. There's ice cream made out of frozen bananas and berries and cocoa powder and dates. There's hot chocolate. We make hot chocolate out of hemp milk and cocoa powder and dates. I mean, there's really a healthier version of just about everything. Mm-hmm. And if you know those foods are going to harm them in any way, and this is why I keep saying it all comes back to the knowing, it all comes back to the learning. So the first step really has to be education for the parent. And if you have a partner who's not on board, you have to try to explain to him or her why this is so important to you. When you're coming from a place of love and caring and not dictatorship, which I know moms here are not trying to be dictators, but I think it's difficult to negotiate that if you have a completely unwilling partner. And, you know, I always came at it from the perspective I love you. I love you, and I never want to see this happen to you. And now we know that these foods lead to this, and I don't want to see that happen to you. So it all comes from the parent's mindset. And if we're willing to let go of those things ourselves and realize they're not health promoting, it's not just adults that it's not good for. It's not good for our kids. It's like you said, the first 10 years of life is very predictive. And some people say I'm way too restrictive with my own personal diet. Well, I have a lot of damage to undo. I grew up on the standard American diet. I used to love Kentucky Fried Chicken and spare ribs. You know, I was not born eating healthy food. So that's why I eat as clean as I do. I feel good and I have peace of mind. And I have peace of mind knowing that I'm feeding my kids foods that won't harm their health as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you say the parents worry about depriving them, all they're really depriving them of is obesity and heart disease and cancer and diabetes. And I agree with you, Sharon, at least with the people I've worked with, that it is the parent that also doesn't want to let go of these things. Because, you know, when you think about it, if a parent was allergic to, say, cats, for example, it wouldn't matter how badly their kid wanted a cat in the house. That parent, I'm pretty sure, is not going to let a cat in. Or if they were allergic to peanuts, didn't matter how bad that kid wanted peanut butter, they're not going to let it in. And they need to use the same idea with these kind of hyperpalatable foods. And again, if I can't tell them that they can say to their kids, you can never have them again, it's probably not realistic, especially if a kid is of a certain age, to either have money to go out and buy it or have it at school. But what I don't understand is why they can't just take control of their own household and say, this is what Dr. Lyle says to do. It's in our, we all did a Mastering the Environment webinar. Part one was Dr. Lyle, part two was you. And he thinks it's perfectly reasonable to say that's fine, but you can't have it in the house. And so this is why I don't understand. They say things like, oh, well, then my kid won't eat. You know, I have interviewed so many doctors and psychologists and pediatricians, local and others, and they said, with very rare exception where there's really a true, you know, like mental disorder, that no child will starve themselves. And even Dr. Goldhammer said, if your kid gets his BMI down to 18, I will intervene. That it never happens. Yes, they may kick and scream and cry and maybe not even eat for a meal or even a day, which is completely safe, but no child will starve themselves to death. And if only healthy food is offered, that's all they're going to eat.
Right. And I'll tell you a little story. When my girls were maybe about 12, 13, I may be underestimating this, but I still buy the Ezekiel bread. That's the only bread that we buy for them. And Marcy is gluten and she doesn't do well with gluten, so she's not having it now. So it's just Evan and Tess who have it. But years ago, they all three ate bread. Tess and Marcy preferred raisin Ezekiel bread, and Evan would eat the plain, the low sodium, which doesn't have any added salt. And so for a long time, I was buying them the raisin bread, and they ate it with savory things. They would do a hummus sandwich with raisin bread, and that was the only bread they would eat. And so I did some reading, and I started finding out that there's more sodium in the raisin bread and the dried fruit, and I just didn't think it was so good for them. And so not that dried fruit isn't good for them, but just as much as they were having wasn't as good as it could have been. So anyway, I decided to stop buying the raisin bread. And when I first made this decision and announced it, the girls refused to eat bread. They just wouldn't eat any bread. And I said, okay, well then don't eat bread. It's your choice. But, you know, there's tortillas. You can have the sprouted corn tortillas if you want. And so for a long time, they wouldn't eat bread. Well, guess what? Eventually, they started eating the plain bread. And now that's all they eat. Now they love it. So,
Right.
yeah, your kid will put up a fuss, and the older they are, the harder it is. And yes, if you have kids my kids' age, and my kids are not driving yet, but if your kids are driving and they're able to go out of the house, they can do whatever they want. You really can't control them at that point. I do agree with that. However, it is your home. And if they're living within your home,
and not paying rent,
and you make the rules, and you say to them, look, this is a no junk food zone. We don't have junk food in our home. If you're going to eat it, you can eat it on the outside, period. And the thing is, you have to have an attitude of love, but you have to be firm. It's not easy. It's just like when your kid does something bad, when your kid's little and they do something bad, they misbehave in some way, you punish them. Well, yeah, they cry. You put them in timeout, they cry a lot. But do you take them out of timeout because they're crying a lot? Or do you make them undergo that, that punishment so that
once you relent, they never take you seriously. That's the thing. It almost seems like we need to somehow empower the parent, which in our case, it's usually the woman. There's been twice, at least for me, where it's been men, to have the self-esteem to just lay down the law.
The self-esteem and the strength and the support. And this is where I come in. I help my clients through this difficult time. If the kid's crying and screaming, I just say, just hold on. It will pass. It always passes. It always does. Once you back down, or once the kid backs down a little bit, you have a little more leeway, and you can make it a positive thing. You can say, listen, I'm not saying we're not going to enjoy food here. We're going to love food. Let's try this lasagna recipe. You want to help me make this? You make it positive. You make it fun. You say to them, pick a dessert from this cookbook, and you hand them unprocessed.
Yeah, there's 40 desserts in unprocessed. Yeah.
Yeah. StraightUpFood.com has excellent dessert recipes. My kids, the first time I made her blueberry brownies or blueberry muffins, they said to me, Mom, these taste like Starbucks muffins. And I was insulted, but they said that was a good thing. So they can't tell the difference anymore between what they used to eat as junk food and what's healthy food, because it all tastes good to them. So the point here is, you don't have to be the bad guy. You're being the good guy, and they just don't see that right away. But if you hang in there and don't give in, the worst thing you can do is back down and give in, because once you do, they'll know that if they kick and scream and yell loud enough, Mom's going to bring those things back into the house. And again, it's not in their best interest to consume them. So you just have to be strong through that time. And it does take some support. You can find a buddy on the Ultimate Weight Loss page, or someone else who's gone through it. I co-moderate a Facebook page called Disease Proof Your Child, where a lot of parents interact there, and you can certainly get support in a place like that. But it really is very important to hold your ground and just be firm but loving, and make it a fun process.
And, they may say they hate you now, but down the road, they're going to love you. My mom let me have all the crap I wanted. That was her way of showing love. And I would have traded anything just to be able to go to my senior prom, but I was too fat for anybody to ask me. So they think they're being nice, and they're not, because they're really, the longer they let this go on, the harder it is to do something about it. That kid might be out of the house anyway at 18. So this is the only time you have to do it. So Sharon, we have a great question from Kristen, who we both know, who has an adorable little kid that does some YouTubes with her. I'd like to just answer it first, if you don't mind, quickly, and then I want your take. She says, what do you suggest parents say when kids ask, can I just try it? Do you ever let them experiment, and did they feel sick? So, when I was 4 years old, my mom drank coffee with cream and sugar every day, and I asked if I could try it, and she let me try it. And I have been drinking coffee with cream and sugar from the age of 4 till almost the age of 30. So I don't think that was a good idea. When my parents smoked, I said, could I try it? And they let me try it. And guess what? I ended up smoking. Now, for some reason with alcohol, I thank God every day that they let me try it, and I hated it. But the other things I liked, and I ended up addicted to them. So I don't think it's a good idea. I want to share what Dr. Jennifer Morano, Dr. Goldhammer's wife, did when they were confronted with this situation with their son Gar, who was born eating this way. And he's a really remarkable young man. I believe he's like 30. His favorite food is Brussels sprouts, because they told him when he was little, when he was good, he would get Brussels sprouts, and now it's his absolutely favorite food. But Dr. Morano was saying that, I don't remember exactly how old Gar was, but he wasn't very old. He was definitely like not even a teenager, probably under 10. And they were at some party, and there were cupcakes there. And he had never seen that, because they didn't eat that kind of thing. They didn't eat sugar or flour or oil or chocolate or animal products. So he went over and he got this cupcake, and he brought it over to his mom and said, Mom, can I have this? And instead of saying, no, you can't, You're going to get sick and die. She sat him down and she explained the ramifications of eating it. And she basically said, Gar, yes, you can have that, but let me explain why I'm not going to have it. He goes, and she really went into a detailed, well, she's a doctor, but it doesn't have to be as scientific about that. He said, if you eat that, you know, you're going to really like it. And then you're going to want to eat it all the time. And then it's going to be really hard for you not to eat it all the time. And he looked at the cupcake and he put it down and he didn't eat it. She treated him like an adult. And I think you did that with your children. Obviously, if somebody has a 3-year-old, you're probably not going to sit them down and say, well, we have a strong family history of cancer. But there's a certain age at which they can understand. So I'm going to let you answer Kristen's question now about when they say, can I just try it? I mean, if they say, can I just try a snort of cocaine? Well, no.
That was
but I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, that was my answer is, can I just try a drag of a marijuana cigarette? Not in my house, but the point is, can I just try it? In what context is that? Because it's not in my house. So there's nothing to try in my house that would be bad. The only thing
maybe they're out at a party. I'm guessing in Kristen's case, maybe they're out at a party,
for example. Well, in that case, I personally would bring something that my kid would eat. And if they say to me, can I try it? I think what I would say is, I think it's going to make you very sick. And, I wouldn't suggest that you try it. With a 3-year-old, I would take control and say, that's not healthy for us. So we're not going to eat that today. You're a parent. You can be a parent in that case. The 3-year-old doesn't know how to make good choices for their health. But I can tell you that when we first started this transition to a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet, I remember my kids would go food shopping. We'd take them to Roots Market, which is one of the organic grocers in our area, and they always have samples out. And they have samples out of the chips, and everything's vegan, but not necessarily healthy. And I remember, I believe it was Marcy, took some of the chips and ate them. And that evening she was very, very, very sick. And she said, I will never do that again. So she learned her lesson. She was a little bit older. If it was a younger kid, I think I would intervene. If it's an older kid, it's really up to the parents' discretion. Certainly, I can't say that one taste of something is going to kill your child or derail them completely. That's true. But, I do know a lot of parents who allow their kids to have pizza and dairy on the outside. If it works for them, that's great. For me, that's not okay. Because, first of all, I believe that the taste perpetuates continued desire for that food. And so then when you try to feed them healthfully at home, it's not going to fly because they've had richer taste. But second of all, dairy's really bad for them. And so I wouldn't want them to have it anywhere. That's the equivalent of your cocaine question. I don't think I would want my kid to do it anywhere. Now, my kids, again, are older now. They can make their own choices, but I don't see any of them clamoring to have a cheese pizza anytime soon. That it's not in their vocabulary anymore.
Terrific. If you guys want to find out more about Sharon or how to work with her, she's offering a 20% discount for first-time clients just by saying Chef AJ. Her website is eatwell-staywell.com. And if you like this broadcast, please share it right now with your friends and fans and followers by using the share button. So Andrea says that her son is 14 and has been vegan his whole life, but we didn't eat very healthy until the last 2 or 3 years. He will eat fruits and veggies, but he's very picky and only eats veggies if I make soup and only prefers corn, potatoes, and carrots if he eats them alone. He loves pasta, but he'll only eat white pasta. How can I gently help him expand his palate so that he's willing to eat a larger variety of fruits and vegetables and switch to whole grain noodles?
I would get him involved in the process, ask him to look at some recipes with you and decide what looks good to him, and then just we like the bean pastas from Tolerant Foods. They taste really amazing. And if you don't want to use those, Ezekiel makes really good sprouted grain pastas or, of course, whole grain pasta. And I don't know that I would talk about it as much as I would just do it. I would just buy it. And if you make the sauce really good, if you use it in the lasagna, like your Disappearing lasagna or Engine 2's Raise the Roof lasagna, if you make the sauce taste good enough, the kids don't really notice the noodles aren't white noodles anymore. Maybe they notice the color. But it's all just about, I remember when we first started off and I took cheese away from them and cheese was a mainstay in their diet. I was buying the diet cheese or Daya cheese, however you pronounce it. I was buying that. I was buying the shreds. And the kids would go into the refrigerator and take the package of shreds and eat them plain. That's how much they love stuff. And then I read Disease Proof Your Child and I said, this stuff is garbage. This stuff has a lot of oil and stuff in it that they shouldn't have. And I stopped buying it. I just stopped buying it. And they kept saying, where's the cheese? What happened to the cheese? And I said, we're not going to buy that anymore. And it was right then that I developed, because they were mostly eating it, on pizzas. So it was then that I developed my pizza hummus recipe.
That's a good one.
Yeah, to take the place of that pizza flavor. And then they stopped asking me where the cheese was, So it's just a question of making the transition taste really good so that it's not a big deal. And from what you just described that your son is eating, I think he's doing pretty good. I think that's awesome. Eat soups. I'd say get him more involved in the process, get him excited about recipes. And if he's willing to help you with the selection of recipes, with flavoring, kids get a kick out of participating in the kitchen. So if you say, taste this, what do you think it needs? You think it needs curry powder? Do you think chili powder would be good? You get them involved in the process, they get more excited, they take ownership, and it becomes something that, it's not a control battle anymore.
Well, she could do with the pasta what you're doing, what you did with the bread. I mean, nobody has to eat pasta. And so she could just stop buying it and only make brown rice pasta or bean pasta or lentil pasta. And then if he eats it, he eats it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Because nobody's going to die without eat because they didn't eat pasta,
Eventually, most likely.
Right. Christy says, I do struggle to stop giving junk snacks to my young kids, but I'm still struggling with myself. My kids are hooked on things like chocolate chip cookies, Dunkin' Donuts, and Goldfish. Oh, my God. What healthy alternatives do you recommend? I know this is my fault and I'm trying.
Well, I don't think you should beat yourself up over the process. You're aware, and that's the first step. So there are lots of great cookie recipes out there. The one that we use the most is a 2-ingredient cookie. You can find it on the burlapbag.com. That's where I found it the first time, but there's endless variations of it. It's really just mashed ripe bananas and oats, rolled oats, and then you can add in whatever you want. We have a brand of chocolate chips called Pascha, I believe, Pascha, that is 100% cocoa. And so it does have the fat of the cocoa bean, but it doesn't have any of the sugar. So you could add dates and you could make a chocolate chip cookie that way, or just add cocoa powder or carob powder and dates, and you could make a version of a chocolate cookie that way. As far as the Goldfish, Nutritional yeast and making one of those cheese sauces based on potatoes and carrots, and they have some that are sweet potato based, making one of those cashew based as well. So you're making one of those cheese sauces and putting it over a whole grain pasta, would give them that cheesy sensation, and also the pizza hummus. Dunkin' Donuts, just any of the recipes, any of the delicious muffins that you do in your book, Unprocessed, or even.
Well, Kathy Fisher has a carrot cake donut. It's carrot cake. My cram muffins taste like carrot cake. I was a pastry chef for 5 years in a Los Angeles restaurant that wasn't even vegan. So most of the desserts and unprocessed and all the ones from the webinar, these are like regular people eat these. They don't even know they're vegan. So there are plenty of options out there already that exist.
What is your cookie that's really, really rich? You got the recipe from some bakery and you made it.
It's on Dr. Olvera's blog now, UC Davis. It's on episode 113 of Healthy Living with Chef AJ. It's called, I forget what it's called, but it's got peanut butter or almond butter and dried fruit and non-dairy chocolate chips and oats. It's unbelievable. It's like the best cookie anyone would ever eat.
Yeah, there's no way your kids could be missing cookies if they eat that cookie.
Absolutely. So Adria wants to know if you're going to be at UWL Live. Absolutely. And maybe if we could find room in the schedule, you could even do a group with the parents on how to do this, We are so Sadia says, more than parents wanting to have junk in the house, we are scared of rejection. You need a lot of self-discipline and persistence yourself to be able to take a stand in a positive way,
Absolutely, totally, 100% agree with that statement. Yes, it has to be from within. And I will say that, I guess, it's a self-esteem issue too, because you want to be, you're a people pleaser. You want everyone to love you. Trust me when I tell you, your kids will love you no matter what. If you're coming from a place of love and caring, they will love you. They may not love you in that moment. My kids hated me. I would go to Dr. Furman's conferences and I would come home and I'd say, okay, kids, no more peanut butter, no more, because I learned about acrylamides and peanut butter. I said, no more peanut butter. We're doing almond butter. And they hated me. They said, oh, why do you have to go to those Dr. Furman conferences? We hate when you go. There's always a new thing you're taking away from us. But, when you ask them now, they're really happy I did it. They're really happy because they know it was all in their best interest. And we still have peanut butter from time to time in a recipe, but we used to have it in the house all the time, and it was consumed in great quantity. And, I knew that had to stop. So the point is, your kids may not love you in that exact moment. And that's what I talked about earlier, where you need the support. And once you get past that and you make it fun, you make them enjoy it, you give them an opportunity to have some control, trust me, it's worth the effort.
So Tina Marie wants to know if you do these, is it cold turkey or transition?
We did transition, but it really depends on the situation and the parent. And I think you have to do what works, whatever works. It's not about perfection. It's about making progress. And the sooner you get your kids off the junk, the easier it is. The more you allow it to go on, the harder it is to transition them away from it. I don't care if you're offering your kids a beautiful salad and then you have donuts on the table. What do you think your child's going to go for? If I had that stuff in the house, my kids wouldn't eat the way that they eat. They're normal, healthy kids. But it's just like, Doug Lyle and Alan Goldhammer teach at True North. If all that you have is healthy options, that's what you'll eat. And that's
Absolutely.
what you
And what they also teach is the number one rule for healthy living is no junk in the house. So stop bringing the crap in, parents, and quit making excuses. Seriously, it drives me crazy. Just get a pair of balls, for God's sake. You don't have to have that crap in the house unless on some level you want it. Get the self-esteem you need by doing what you need to do, that you can say no. Who's the parent? Who is the parent?
Exactly.
And if the spouse isn't on board, then get therapy with somebody like Dr. Lyle to explain this to the spouse, that this is serious business. You love your child, but you create a life of disease for them in the future, of cancer and heart disease and obesity. I mean, I don't get it. I'm sorry. So I don't know how old this person is, because their picture, it's like a cartoon, but I'm thinking maybe it's a younger person. Holly says, I tell my mom I want to eat plant-based, and she says, but you have to have some meat, dairy, and fat. So frustrating. Do you ever work in the opposite way, Sharon, where you're working with children that want to be healthy, but their parents are extremely unhealthy?
I've worked with children before, but not that their parents wanted them to be unhealthy. That's a tough situation. And I would encourage you, if you live anywhere in Maryland, I'd love for you to connect with my kids and come to our potluck. Even so, you're welcome to connect with my kids. And if you message me, I'll be happy to give you their addresses. You need some support from your peers. And there are definitely some great references out there that you can share with your mom. There's a great paper written by Kaiser about how, plant-based diet is good for preventing almost all types of disease that plague us today. There are so many great references you can share with her, like the Forks Over Knives movie, the Disease Proof Your Child book. It's a tough situation. I actually have some kids who come to my potluck. They're teenagers, and they drag their mothers along, and they are the healthy eaters. And I talk to the moms, and they say, well, yeah, she's starting to influence me. It's usually the girls. She's starting to make an influence, and I'm starting to eat healthier. And so, it's great if you can find a meetup in your area to connect with, and maybe get your mom to take you to some of those events that they have, so she's exposed to more of this. And, if you're inclined to do so, maybe share some recipes with her.
Yeah. So Rhonda says, is there a cookbook with recipes kids tend to like? The kids tend to dislike the recipes in, and she doesn't finish. But yeah, there's Unprocessed. There's Plant Powered Family by Drina Burton. There's the Forks Over Knives family book. So there's quite a lot.
Yeah, there are also
one by Jennifer McCann called, I think it's called Vegan Lunchbox. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's let's see, kid-tested-firefighter-approved.com is another good blog. And Mitch Spinach for really young kids, mitchspinach.com has some good recipes on it. There are lots of resources out there. So it's just experimenting. Unprocessed, honestly, everything I made from that book was a hit. So I can't think of a single recipe that we made that the kids didn't love.
That's fantastic. So Helen says, what about when one parent disagrees with the food choices? Have you had a situation where you're working with I mean, there was one you told me about. I like the little kid, not going to obviously say name, but it seemed in that particular case, there was one parent on board and the other parent almost kind of sabotaging. So what do you do in a case when one parent isn't on board or disagrees with the food choices?
It's a very tough situation. I'm not going to lie. This situation that I had, I was working with the father, and the father had an overweight son and a son who was still young but normal weight, and the mom who was just completely not on board. And the situation was complicated further because they lived with the mother-in-law, who was even worse than the mom at not being on board. The mom would pack the kids every day in the lunches candy. They'd get the Halloween candy, and every day for lunch until it ran out, they'd get Halloween candy in their lunch. And this was an overweight kid. It was a very sad situation. That is the toughest situation to deal with. And although we made progress, we never got there 100% because I couldn't get the mom to come in. I mean, I think she came into one session and she was clearly shut down. I don't know that there's a good answer for that. I'd say in that situation, you have to do the best you possibly can, and you have to negotiate as best you can. And again, this is where the education piece comes in. Share with your partner all of these great resources that demonstrate how important it is not to give kids these foods that endanger their health. And other than that, I would say if there's that much of a discrepancy, I think you're right, AJ, when you say that there's some deeper issues there. There are definitely some underlying deeper issues that have to be resolved, maybe by counseling of some sort. But
absolutely, because the bottom line is a loving partner will support someone in recovery. And that is the bottom line.
Especially when
they're not supporting you, there's something else going on other than just the food. I doubt that that's the only place that they're not being supported in the marriage and the relationship.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
They don't want to look at it. So again, it comes down to self-esteem, ladies. Nice girls finish fat. And you know what Dr. Lau says, the greater your weight, the lower your self-esteem. So get on the program, lose that weight, raise your self-esteem, and boot him out of the house if he's not going to do what you say. Because, your kids are important and their health is important. You don't realize the way you're damaging their brains right now, or creating a future of just disease and all these things that are in Dr. Furman's 2 books, which I hope you'll all read. So Christy says I'm assuming that's her family or kids, have been eating UWL compliant food with me for over 20 days. It made them all feel sick, and they are telling me they will never eat that stuff again. Well, first of all, nobody says you have to feed your kids UWL food. There's a big difference between feeding them the most extreme version of a plant-based diet, which is designed for ultimate weight loss in people that are severely food addicted, and not feeding them crap like processed food. So there's a whole spectrum, number one. And so I don't recommend necessarily feeding kids UWL food. But if they feel sick, I can promise you it's not from the food. It's because they're detoxing because they don't have the crap. That is why they're being sick. Cause does not always equal effect. So you make meals, you make food, you get an air fryer and you make sweet potato fries or potato fries. And if you have to have salt, you put it on the table for them. You make big batches of rice and beans with delicious sauces and vegetables. Make your own potato bar. So the UWL food is not making them sick. What is making them sick is that they're going through withdrawal and detoxification from not eating the crap. But nobody ever said you have to feed them UWL food. You feed them the recipes in unprocessed, forks over knives, engine 2, those kind of foods. They can, if they're not overweight or food addicts themselves, they can probably have some flour products and even possibly a little bit of sugar. Well, I wouldn't say it. I don't think any sugar is probably the right amount, because they can have state sweetened things and like that. But I don't have a problem with the tortillas or Ezekiel breads or things like that. But, as long as you keep feeding them the food, they're never going to develop a taste for the healthy food. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I will say they could be getting sick if they've been eating a fiber-free diet of just junk food and meat and dairy, and suddenly they're getting all this fiber. It's going to be a shock to their digestive system, and they may feel a little sick for a while, like you said, detoxing, and also they don't have the right digestive enzymes and gut flora yet to digest all of that fiber. So you may have to be a little more gradual about it. And this is where an approach like Engine 2, which has those hearty meals that do have a lot of flour and some of the heavier plant foods like the avocados and the nuts and seeds, that's what I would go for, for your family. If you can hopefully find a way to not eat those yourself. I mean, we have nut butter in the house. I don't eat it. I don't struggle with my weight, but I do have a tendency, if I start eating a lot of nuts and seeds, I will put weight on. And I keep the weight down because I am trying to prevent breast cancer. And, being overweight is one of the biggest risk factors. So I try to stay as slim as I possibly can for that reason and that reason alone. But we do have nut butter in the house. My son makes his own nut butter all the time. And we don't have avocados in the house anymore, I'll be honest, because one of my daughters was completely abusing them and eating like 10 a day, even though she's slim. It was showing on her skin, and she had a lot of, a lot of pimples, a lot of acne. And so we just had to stop buying it. She can eat it if we're out, but we don't bring them into the house very often. So the point is,
sorry.
I was just going to say, your family needs to have that transitional high calorie food that is still health promoting, but it's higher in calorie than maybe you're eating on UWL.
Yeah, we don't expect them to eat vegetables for breakfast unless they want to, or just eat fruits and vegetables. And by the way, UWL, contrary to popular belief, is a starch-based diet. At least 3/4 of your calories need to come from whole starches. So Christy says her post got cut off. She says they'd been doing well eating UWL food. They chose to eat junk at a restaurant and felt sick. That's called MacDougalls Revenge, I believe. So, let me see. Here's some questions. It goes very fast. So Crystal wants to know what's wrong with peanut butter.
If you're eating peanut butter the way that our family ate peanut butter, which was in everything, on everything, Dr. Furman talked about acrylamides, because peanuts are usually—
Dr. Campbell does too, yeah.
Not eaten raw. They're eaten roasted. And when you roast things like that, it forms acrylamides, which are possibly linked to cancer. And so for me, you have to understand where I'm coming from. We have such a strong family history of cancer that if I hear that word even linked to something, I just say, you know what, we're not going to have that. Like I said, we do on occasion, if we're at a potluck and somebody makes one of those African peanut stews, the kids eat it, but it's not something we have in the house. It tends to be something they would overeat on. They do have now, my son makes his own nut and seed butter. So it depends on where you're coming from.
Well, the thing is there's healthier alternatives to peanut butter, like tahini, like almond butter. Peanut butter is crack. It's processed crack. So many people have problems with it, and often the parent has problems having it in the house because they binge on it and they can't moderate their weight and their food addiction if peanut butter's in the house. So Christine says her 10-year-old son will only eat fruit, Eve's brand veggie nuggets, peanut butter, and jelly and grilled cheese. So who's buying all that stuff for him?
Yeah, but you give it to him, that's all he's going to eat. I remember when Evan was younger, he was about 8 or so, and I was eating chickpeas, and he started making fun of me. Mom, you're eating chickpea. That's disgusting. Just being a typical little kid. But he wouldn't eat it. He thought it was disgusting. Well, now it's in the things that are not healthy for him, he won't be able to eat them anymore. And nothing else. As I think of that line in the movie Forks Over Knives by that woman, Evelyn. She's passed away. She was a heart patient, and she was talking about how she used to love donuts. They were delicious, but she realized they were bad for her, and so now she just eats something else. And that's how kids are. Kids just will, if something else is there, they'll eat something else. And I think you hit on this earlier, AJ, when you talked about if the kids are hungry. So a really important time to serve the healthy food is when they're hungry. So when they walk in the door from school, my kids always had a big salad on the table and a pot of vegetables. I literally have to fight my kids now to get my vegetables in, because we make a pot of vegetables and they're all grabbing them. And, one of them loves them with oak rotes and tomato paste, and they put sauces on them, but they eat lots of vegetables. So it's all about giving them healthy foods when they're hungry. And don't keep giving them the junk food, the cheese crackers and things like that. Just bring them into the house. They will eat if they're hungry. They'll eat what's there. And there's nothing wrong with eating fruit. That's a good thing. Just get them to eat more vegetables and whole grains and beans and legumes and, some nuts and seeds, and you'll be fine.
It's what I say. Make it a rule. No junk in the house. That's what all the experts like Dr. Lyle says. So Angie gave you a shout out. She said, sometimes we need support, encouragement, and permission to rid our homes of the junk. Sharon talked me through Halloween, and it turned out great with little upset. I was going to give in, and she just kept insisting that I stay on the right path, and I did. That support was invaluable. Our entire lives and environment has completely changed, and now no one complains. If you'd like to work with Sharon, she's offering a 20% discount to everyone watching this video using my name, Chef AJ, at her website, which I posted right here on the screen, eatwell-staywell.com for first-time clients. And she's really great. She's not a bitch like me, or at least she's not going to be one when you hire her. And it can really help you doing the right thing for your family. So Christy says, ideas for places where candy is constantly handed out. Our church and some of our homeschool groups hand out candy as prizes for everything. My kids hate feeling different because their mom says they can't have it.
Bring them their own treats. That's all I can see. You might suggest to whoever is responsible for serving those sorts of things, you might gently suggest to them that they have other healthy alternatives, but bring their own treats that are really good. Some of those truffles from your book, there's lots of other treats, and just say, these are the ones we're going to eat, and make them taste really good.
Yep. So Winter says, when you say a pot of vegetables, you mean, you meant cooked vegetables, correct?
Yes, we have cooked vegetables, and we have a big salad as well.
Okay. So Tina, we're getting towards the end. So Tina submitted this question in advance because she wasn't sure she could watch live. It's kind of long, so you'll just pick out the parts that you want to address. She goes, how do you navigate trying new recipes when you have picky eaters that are addicts too? With working full time, it is hard to make recipes that no one will eat, especially when I add dates or nuts to them to make them more palatable to them, and they don't like them or eat it only once. I can't eat it, and food ends up getting thrown out. They don't like much UWL food, and I know that neuroadaptation is a factor, but we are walking a tightrope of wanting them to eat healthier while allowing healthy non-UWL foods. See, that's the thing. You can't do it both ways. You can't have your foot in both worlds, as Shada says. I need to try more recipes for them, but time and energy are at a premium, and it is hard to make stuff that won't get eaten. Also, letting them bring food that they will eat into the house can be triggering. Even if I don't eat that food, I will drive to get other food if I'm triggered. Making them eat in the car, I just can't. Why not? I don't understand. I feel like let them have the shame of knowing what they're doing. That's a great thing. Make them eat in the car. It's like making smokers go outside and smoke. Eventually they stop smoking. I feel like I have to forge my way in uncharted waters and lots of trial and error. For now, I love that my daughter eats salad and veggies and hummus and fruit and potatoes she likes. Most cooked meals are 90% no-go, but we're trying. Any advice would be helpful. What do your kids eat for dinner, or did they in the very beginning? So with the last few minutes, if you could just address how to help Tina Marie.
Okay, so first off, your kids are not going to be thrilled with every decision that you make initially. They're not going to, like Angie was saying, her kid put up a fuss initially, but she stood her ground, and now there's no battle anymore. So stand your ground is the first thing I would say. As far as getting healthy food into the house when you don't have a lot of time to prepare it these days, you can go to Whole Foods Market and get the Engine 2 line of products. You can order meals from Plant Pure Nation. There are all these other food service delivery options that you can do as well. And there's all this prepared foods that you can get, rice bowls, and Costco has some of these things. So the other thing is, get your kids to look through some recipe books with you and choose what they think sounds good. Burritos are an easy hit in our house with just a can of black beans, some avocado, and a jar of salsa, and roll that up in a corn tortilla with some greens. My kids love that. It's quick, it's easy. It doesn't have to be a formal recipe. It can just be things that are thrown together, a sweet potato or regular potato topped with, your favorite stuffed potato, AJ, your guacamole and beans and salsa and things like that. So I think you have to take away the notion that it has to be a formal recipe every single night. And what my kids like to eat for dinners, we do a lot of things in the Instant Pot. The Instant Pot has saved our lives. It's made my life so much easier. Basically, I use a lot of your UWL recipes, which we find delicious. So we love Indian food, so we do a lot of curries. We like Mexican food, so we do a lot of chilies. And other than that, just kind of whatever. The other night I made baked falafel from straightupfood.com. That was delicious. I've made some stew recipes from pcrm.org. There's so many great resources out there. Just experiment. And every single recipe doesn't have to be a hit. Don't make yourself crazy. Initially, when your kids are transitioning, they might not love every single thing, and that's okay. It's like you said, AJ, I think the take it or leave it mentality is the best one. This is dinner. This is dinner tonight. If you're hungry, you'll eat it. And you might have a side of potatoes or sweet potatoes, so you don't have to feel like you're starving your kids. But the bottom line is, you're doing the right thing when you make these decisions and when you take action. You are doing the right thing. You are doing the thing that is most protective of your child's future health. And you have to be confident in that. You won't always be the most popular mommy in the house that moment. But trust me when I tell you that later on, when they're grown, they will appreciate all of your efforts. And they will neuroadapt, and they will learn to love the food that you give them.
Absolutely. Well, I think on that note, that would be the perfect place to end. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing your expertise. Thank you all for watching. And if you want to connect more with Sharon, she does have a Facebook. Tell them about your Facebook group one more time. What is it called?
I have a couple of Facebook groups, but the one that they would be most interested in is Disease Proof Your Child. It's just a Disease Proof Your Child group. And I co-moderate that. There are a couple of pediatricians that are plant-based on there, Dr. Paul Porras, who's local in Maryland, and Yami from your group, Dr. Yami. She's wonderful. So they will answer any medical questions that come up. But it's basically a lot of parents just talking to each other, parents who have kids of the same age, and interacting and, sharing recipes and tips and those sorts of things. So that's a really great resource for them. Then I also have my Eat Well, Stay Well page as well.
How do people get on your mailing list?
They can go to my website, which is eatwell-staywell.com, or they can email me at sharon@eatwell-staywell.com. And one last thing I'd like to say is that I wanted my kids to have support early on when I made the transition. So when Forks Over Knives came out in 2011, they offered a portion of meetup.com for free to people who wanted to start a Forks Over Knives meetup in their area. And I took that opportunity and I started a meetup. And we've grown from 14 members back then to over 1,400 members today. And we have a monthly potluck. And my kids get to sit and interact with all these people. We usually have between 60 and over 100 people there. And the food is delicious. They get to try all these recipes. I ask that people take it a step further than just Forks Over Knives and make it also sugar and salt free, but not everybody complies. People do write recipe cards out. My kids read them, they scrutinize them, and they know what they can and can't eat. But we have other teens and other kids there. So it's good.
So if they live anywhere near Columbia, Maryland, or are willing to travel, they could come to your monthly potluck. Absolutely. And it's oil-free too, though. You said sugar and salt, but your oil's important, right?
Oil-free. Well, Forks Over Knives is oil-free. That's why I didn't mention
got it. And children are welcome at this as well.
Absolutely. It's family-oriented. And you can find us on meetup.com. We're called Columbia, Maryland Forks Over Knives Meetup Group. But if you're not in our area, start your own meetup. Hook up with other parents in your area who are trying to raise their kids healthfully. And it lets your kid know that they are not alone. I also brought my kids to Vegetarian Summerfest, where they
good idea.
And that's a great event. It's in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. You'll be speaking there this year, right, AJ?
Yes.
So that's a great event. I can't recommend it highly enough. So just get your kids around other kids that are eating healthfully so they know they're not alone.
And you know what else a great event is? The Eat Well - Stay Well one-day immersion, which is produced by you and a local plant-based physician, Dr. Dana Simpler. Why don't you tell the people when it is and make sure they get on your mailing list, because I know you often offer discounts if they register early. Why don't you tell them when it is and who the speakers are this year?
So this year it will be on November 4th. We haven't started selling tickets yet because we don't have our speaker lineup complete, but we're very excited that we have Chef AJ to do the cooking portion of the program. And our keynote speaker is Dr. Joel Fuhrman, who wrote the 2 books I've been talking about. So we're super excited to have you both and look forward to adding some other great speakers to our lineup as well. And that announcement we hope will come within the next couple of months. So look for those tickets to be available then.
Right. Okay. I'm going to just one quick question and then we got to go. But Tina Marie says it's hard when extended families disagree. Relatives want to give them treats. There's a perception of bad parenting, just another layer. Navigating change can be hard. So can you please help this poor woman? Because I'm out of tricks. I mean, I already told her what to do. And
extended families. My husband's family eats a pretty sad diet, standard American diet. And when we have to travel to see them. And when we first traveled to see them, we made it very clear. The kids were younger. We had just transitioned and we made it very clear. They will not be eating the food here. We brought everything they could possibly need. We are trying to feed them a healthy diet because they're at a strong, likelihood of getting cancer in their lives. We want to minimize that risk. And so, please honor us. We're here not for the food. We're here to share time with you and to spend time with you. And we are not in any way insulting you by this. We just want our kids to eat the food that we provided for them. We were very firm, but very loving. And to this day, when we go to visit them, we bring our Instant Pot, we bring all of our utensils, we bring all of our own food, and we have our food at one end of the table and they all have their food at the other end, and we all get along just fine. So this is another situation where you have to be loving, firm, and you can even sort of fudge it and say, our pediatrician recommended this as the healthiest diet. And so we're trying it out, use the Doug Lyle approach. We're trying it out, seems to be working really well. And we hope that you'll respect our wishes and not try to feed the kids anything that's not, that isn't what we brought.
Absolutely. And like the old saying goes, When you hang around a barber shop, it's just a matter of time until you get a haircut. If there's healthy food in the house, your kids will eat it. No child will starve themselves to death. And if there's unhealthy food in the house, they will not eat the healthy food. They will always choose the unhealthy food. That's called the pleasure trap. So thank you so much, Sharon. Thanks everybody for watching. If you'd like to get 20% off your first session working with Sharon, who is an expert in transitioning families, especially children, to this way of eating, her website is eatwellstaywell.com. Thanks all of you for watching another episode of Healthy Living Live. I'm Chef AJ, and along with Sharon McRae, we make healthy, taste delicious, and we do not feed children or other living things unhealthy food. So take care, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Remember, sugar is not healthy for children or other living things.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm trying to end the broadcast. This is so funny. I can't.